And I will try to remember to send you guys the link to that recording as well. And on this next slide, it tells you a little bit about me if this is your first time with this session with me. But like I said, I saw a lot of names I recognized. That is my contact information there. If you do Twitter, feel free to give me a shout out on Twitter. I am not a regular Twitter user. I check it occasionally. My husband cracks me up. He'll say, "Did you see what I sent you on Twitter?" Now, I don't think he's ever composed a tweet in his life, but he had me create him a Twitter account so he could follow all the sports people. So he'll send me random sports stuff or things that he thinks are funny on Twitter. So anyway, I have a couple of Twitter accounts. This is one that's kind of dedicated to my job. I am a mom of 3 and a wife to Marty, who is a teacher and a coach. I've been in education 23 years. I'm nationally board certified. I'm a Google certified trainer. This is a picture of all my people in Alabama Technology in Motion. Before I worked in this job at JSU, I was the technology integration specialist for St. Clair County Schools. So I have worked in a school district. And then in the life before that, I was a high school English and theater teacher. So for those of you that are elementary folks, keep in mind, I do have the mindset of a high school person. So when I'm talking about some of these tools, jump in if you have an elementary application or an idea that maybe I haven't thought of, because we get that way. Our lane is high school or middle school or elementary school or early childhood or special ed, and because that's our mindset, we think differently about applications of different tools. So the one thing that I miss about face-to-face PD is that people feel more comfortable jumping in and saying, "Hey, here's how I've used this," or "Here's an idea." So please feel free today to jump in and be very informal. I am a very fast talker. Sometimes I don't pay attention if there's something in the chat. So for those of you that are return visitors, if you will help me out and stop me if you see a question in the chat that I need to address, I would appreciate that. So what are the expectations today? Follow along with the presentation. I will be going in and out of the presentation, taking you to sites and talking about some ideas. If that is confusing to you, don't leave the presentation. Just sit and listen. But ideally, if there are links and you want to follow those links and try things as I'm talking, feel free. This presentation is not going away. It will be here. If you come back and it looks different, it's because I didn't think about making a copy first. I just immediately started adapting it for another presentation, but the meat of it will still be the same. So anyway, I would just encourage you. I do this all the time. I always tell people, whenever you get a presentation that is a view only for you, I always tell people, go up here to File and say make a copy. Or not add shortcut to Drive. You want to actually make your own copy. And that will be saved in your Drive for you to edit and use however you want. Now, I encourage you to stay in my copy of the presentation today, just so that you can kind of follow along and see the things that I'm doing. But this is after we're done. I would say make a copy of the presentation, have it in your Drive, and then if something crazy happens and mine does go away or gets changed drastically, you have all the resources here. At the end, like I mentioned before, there is an attendance document that I will need for you to mark to assist me in figuring out who was here. All right. The next thing is about Zoom itself. So I mentioned this already. There are some different tools in Zoom. You can unmute your microphone. You can start your video unless you're in your pajamas. Unless you feel like showing us your pajamas, go for it. But I know that a lot of times in the morning, everybody's got that bed head and they're just glad to be here. So you don't have to start your camera. The participants list and the chat box is available to you, those reactions if you have them. And just know that when I go full screen, it may change your view. All right, so we are going to look at our survey results. I've got 15 people. If you didn't get a chance to complete the survey, that is okay too. So I like looking at a survey like this because it really kind of gives me an idea of who's in the room and also what we know. So it looks like a good rainbow there of people here. So I am seeing a chunk of us in 4th through 6th grade. Then I'm guessing that green is 7th and 8th grade, that darker green. So we've got a little bit of everything here today. So welcome. I did see when some of you were listing your high schools and middle schools and elementary schools, I recognized a lot in my region. So glad to have you guys here. My school uses the following. Notice that it says you can use either. I'm going to guess, just based on a lot of the schools that I saw listed in the chat, that many of your districts are Google districts. But some of you are in a district where you also have access to the Microsoft tools. They may already be preloaded on machines. But I usually talk about the Google tools in the world of Hyperdocs because it is very simple. But keep in mind, as we're going through this, everything I'm talking about can fairly easily be applied to the Microsoft tools as well. And we'll talk about that too. All right, so this is the important thing. Who has experience doing these things? So we have about 2 people that have experience really trying, making, looking for and editing Hyperdocs. So this is going to be very beginner. You will leave here with tons more resources than I can cover in a presentation. So, so keep in mind that everything we're doing is not going to be something that we will look at today. So, so you'll see it on there, and I may not go to that link. I may just say you can look at that later. So here is kind of Hyperdoc defined, since we have so many people that are new to it. So let me ask this, and you can put it in the chat if you feel this way. Is there anyone out there who didn't really know what a Hyperdoc was? You just signed up for this session because you needed the hours, or you'd heard of it, but you've never seen one, or at least do we kind of sort of know what a Hyperdoc is? Because you never know. Sometimes I get people in a presentation are like, I just needed the credit. I wanted to see what this is. I maybe heard somebody say something about it. So anyway, I always say it's okay if it's brand spanking new concept to you. So here's a definition. A Hyperdoc is a digital document such as a Google Doc. Doesn't mean it has to be, but you're going to see a lot of Google documents and slides and things here, where all components of a learning cycle have been pulled together into a central hub. Now, that is one of the most important parts of this definition, is everything is in one place. Sorry, gotta have a little coffee. Students are provided with hyperlinks to all of the resources that they need to complete the learning cycle. So we're going to hear a lot about this learning cycle, and we'll look at what that means too. And then you see the picture there of the book. Lisa Highfield, Kelly Hilton, and Sarah Landis are given credit for giving this the name Hyperdoc, and they published their book in 2016. Their book and their accompanying website have gone through lots of changes, and actually went through the biggest change a few months ago, really right before the remote learning stuff kind of hit. And so we're going to look at their site, but if you really want more information, you look up any of these ladies' names or just Hyperdoc on Pinterest, and you just prepare for hours down the rabbit hole. So this is my opinion. You remember the web quest? Think bigger and better. So I can remember when I was in college being asked to create a web quest for students, and that was some high technology, making a web quest. So I'm going to assume unless you're all way, way younger than I am, that you remember making a web quest. This is not just taking your worksheet and adding some hyperlinks to it. And I have a list of guidelines in a document, and I just took this from various places and sort of made it a one-pager, because I think that helps. Sometimes we get all this information, a slideshow, and we go on Pinterest and it just goes crazy. So if you will look at this when you are ready to create one from scratch, here is sort of your plan of attack. If you like step 1, step 2, you're going to identify your objectives, which should be the first step of anything that you're creating. Create a cycle of learning. Now it says create, not really create, it's more like choose. There are so many learning cycles out there. And you may recognize some of these. These are not the only ones, but think about what it is your district requires in your lesson plans, in strategic teaching. And so what is it that you're focusing on? That is your learning cycle. Then you got to decide how you're going to package the learning. Is it a document, a slide deck? There's more than just those ideas. Decide on your workflow. You know, how are you going to send it out to students? How are you going to get things back from students? And it can be a lot of technology tools, or it really could just be 1 or maybe 2 that you're utilizing through this. And then design it for engagement. A Hyperdoc is not something that is flat. It is engaging. There's a theme. There's colors, fonts. You don't have to be clever and cutesy to make this happen, but just know we have kids that are used to being entertained by iPads and game systems and everything else. So you want your Hyperdoc to send them into the lesson. And so anyway, I just liked that. And then here is a more visual look at those steps to creating a Hyperdoc. So first, decide your objectives, essential questions like the why, decide your learning cycle, and then determine what you're going to use. And so that's kind of as you're making a plan for this. The learning cycle can be as simple as 3 steps: explore, explain, and apply. I think we would all agree if we could get our students to do all of those things in an assignment, we're winning. So the learning cycle can be that simple, or it can be a little more complex, like this one that starts over here on the left, engage. That's like the hook. I remember when I would create lesson plans, I would always look for a hook, something to grab their attention immediately, especially in the high school environment when they're swapping classes over and over. I'm the nerdy English teacher that dressed up like a witch when I was teaching the Macbeth or the Crucible. I was always doing something crazy because I want to get their attention immediately. Explore is where they are going to be exploring a topic, where that constructivism and that inquiry comes in. Explain is when the teacher may give some direct instructions, some mini lessons, and this is where they're going to get kind of what I call front loading of information. Apply is when they're going to take what they learned and put it into action. This next one is share. So that's when they're sharing it with the teacher, but even better with a larger audience. And then reflect. This is the piece that I tend to forget sometimes, is giving students an opportunity to reflect on what they've learned. So I put this out here right now, and I do want just a little bit of feedback. I don't want to spend too much time on it, and I'm going to set an alarm on my phone, because if I don't set an alarm, then I'll be talking and you guys will be like, is she ever going to stop? Because the session's supposed to be over. But I do want a little bit of feedback. Either put it in the chat or unmute your mic and let me know what you think. Remote learning, as it all happened, and we were all thrown into, I'm not going to see my students every day, but I still have to teach them every day. What kinds of things did you have to do? Now I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. Either type something in the chat or unmute your mic and tell me, what kinds of things did you have to do to try and engage your students? when it came to the remote learning environment? What tools did you use to make videos? Somebody let me know.
Social meetings, we would have games or themes for that day, and I would have more show up on those days, a lot more.
So you're talking about when you did like Google Meets or like
Yes.
this?
Yes, when I did my Google Meets, which I did, the social ones were twice a week, I would do either a theme or we would have a game that they knew usually ahead of time that was going to be done. It may be a hangman, it may have been a scavenger hunt,
Yes.
or it may have just been us playing a which one do you like better game, whatever, or music. Music was one of the things we did. They enjoyed that.
So they were on board for those, but any of those academic ones, not so much. Anybody
I
else?
usually had 3 show up for my math, daily math. I did, so there was usually 3 every day for daily math because their parents made them come.
Yeah, and I was going to say those 3 probably didn't need it, but all right. So tell me, anybody else in the chat, or you want to unmute your mic and tell me what are some things that you had to change and do?
Another teacher and I partnered together, and we made videos of my dog talking and teaching personification and idioms and other things.
English teacher happy right here.
They had to respond and, you know, using proper grammar and paragraph form and all that good stuff on Google Docs.
Yeah. I see that Nicole mentioned able to help teachers with WebEx and Google Meet setups. Look, I really feel like my job became what I refer to as our hair is on fire, because all of the sudden teachers that had heard of some of the things were kind of using them, utilizing them some in class, were immediately thrown into the fire of, oh my gosh, we didn't use this all of the time. We're not one-to-one where kids take this home. Now what do we do? And so, yeah, I was helping people set up things. I had teacher friends that were texting me. I used to, when I worked in the school district, I used to have a red phone case. And I would refer to it as the red bat phone of technology. I'm like, those people that have this number call it a lot, and it's the red bat phone of technology. So I said the blue bat phone of technology was working hard during remote learning. Oh, look at that. Nicole says our district just rolled out WebEx right before the pandemic. Yeah, if you had just done something new, it threw everybody off. Let's see. So the majority of your students don't have access to the internet. Gay, that I would say was the dilemma in St. Clair County where my children go to school. They are not one-to-one, so they couldn't guarantee that every student had a device. The internet in some areas of St. Clair County is spotty. And so there was a lot of packets sent home. They are not a Google district, so there was no Google Classroom for delivery of things. They used Microsoft Teams, which many of the middle and elementary students had not used before, even though the district had it. So looking at, yeah, Brian's talking about Google Classroom, Google Meet. Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit if you're a Google school. You have these tools. Now, whether you had really used them to the full capacity, like, you know, Brian, I follow Brian on social media, so I know he is a mover and a shaker in the technology world. So he was clicking on all cylinders with different tools, and the students were probably used to it. The problem is there were a lot of teachers who were still more traditional, not bad, just more traditional. So when they had to go completely online, they were shaken. Their kids were shaken because they were so used to that kind of teaching. I'll even tell you this, my husband is in graduate school right now, and he's been in education for longer than I have. And I sort of pushed him to get his master's degree. He's always been coaching and busy and hasn't had a chance. And I said, you need to get it. It's all online. It's ed leadership. You can do this. In those first few classes, he was miserable because the last time he was in college was 1992. So there was no online classes in 1992. He has really struggled with online learning, and he's an adult and he understands education. He said, "Is this always just a bunch of reading and writing?" I'm like, "Yes, welcome back to college." So I will tell you this, that a lot of teachers and a lot of your students are not built for this. And so it was a struggle. So I ask you all of this, first of all, for us to just remember we're all in this together, not to be quote High School Musical, but yes, we are. And this is something that everybody has struggled with. I'm hoping that Hyperdocs can be another tool in your toolbox to present engaging remote learning to your students. I know right now many school districts are coming out with their calendars, with their plans. And the one thing we all have in common is we have no idea what the fall is going to look like. We can guess, we can assume, but I've learned, and I'm such a planner, I've learned that I have no idea what next week is going to look like. And that's kind of my new normal, not to use that phrase too much, but it is. So back to creating Hyperdocs, what can you use? You can use any of these tools to build a Hyperdoc, as long as you follow those principles of, do you know your essential question and your objectives? Have you determined your learning cycle? In that learning cycle, how are you going to address engaging students in each area of that learning cycle? And then, how are you going to package it? How are you going to get things back from students? The Google tools really lend themselves to a smooth digital workflow, which is why when you see Brian and some of these other teachers talk about, I used Google this and then Google this, and they just work well together. So it is seamless. And if your students get accustomed to that, that process is seamless as well. So no matter what you use, you're going to be doing these things. Inserting a hyperlink that takes you somewhere, a website, a video, or a document. You're going to insert pictures. And then you're going to make what I call cosmetic changes, like fonts and backgrounds and things like that. If you're more advanced, you're going to make a table and you're going to fill in those cells. So on this right here, I have a link to my not so awesome Hyperdoc. And so I put this one out here, and if I shared it correctly, which I hope I did, it may be view only for you guys, but this is another one where you can make a copy and just what I call kick the tires of this idea. And so this is just kind of if I was starting from scratch, what would I do? And so here is the bones of a Hyperdoc. So first of all, I want to engage my students visually. So I'm going to actually change the background color of this basic Google document. And I'm going to do that by going to File and Page Setup. And so I'm going to change this page color. Now, I'm no graphic designer, but I know contrast is important. So I'm going to choose a lighter color because I'm going to use the dark fonts. So I'm just going to go with kind of this orangey yellow color. That may not seem like much, but in a world where your students are getting lots of white paper and white documents with the black writing, having a colored background makes this feel more alive. Just trust me on that. So I'm going to, so I'm going to get rid of that particular part, and I'm going to go here to title. So now if you click on this link and you go to this and you see, gosh, she's made all these changes. What I've done is I've gone to version history, and over here on the right, I can actually take this back to its original form and play around with it over and over. So that's kind of what I do with this crazy document. So now I'm going to address this title. So I'm going to make it bold. I'm going to choose a new font, maybe something fun like Happy Monkey. But if you don't see a font that you like, you can go to more fonts, and you can really search for some unique fonts. And once you search those fonts and you add them to your list of fonts, it's there. Like, it will be there from now on. So if I really like the lobster font, now lobster is listed for me, I'm gonna change the size of that font, make it larger, and then I also need to center that. So all of these things are just those cosmetic changes that I mentioned for, to engage your students. So now I've got to add a picture of a computer disk. These students may not even know what that is. But the beauty of Google Documents and all the Google tools is you have all these options for images. I love the search the web option. It allows me to search for any kind of image that I want. Oftentimes, if you're looking for an image that's not like a real image, you can put in here cartoon or clip art, and it will give you more of a cartoonish look to that computer disk. Let's see, I think I used clip art the other day. There we go. And so, if I want to use that one, I can just double click and I can insert it into that. It's huge. So of course I want to manipulate that computer disk. Now, when you're inserting any kind of picture in Google Docs, if you have that picture selected, you have some options down here. I like wrap text. It allows me to utilize more of the page. And so I can go in here and do that. So here are my steps in my learning cycle. So I'm just doing that simple engage, explore, explain. So how am I going to engage them? I'm going to use a video on technology integration. I can use insert and I can add a video. So I'm going to say insert a, let's see, hold on. Sorry, I had to zoom out a little bit. So I'm going to insert a link here and I'm going to, and I can search. So I'm going to say video technology. All right, so maybe I don't see something that I'm looking for. If I can click find more, this explore tool is going to pop up over on the side and I can look for something specific. I can say YouTube video technology. And there's something called the Tech Insider. If I want to use that one, I can. I'm going to check it out. Let's see, does this look like something I want? Oh, there's a whole channel. So there's something on new inventions. There we go. They're saving the earth. Okay, so I'm going to say this is the video that I want, and I'm going to include this in my Hyperdoc. So I can link things in several different ways in a Hyperdoc. What you want to do is not just paste that ugly link there. You're going to want to take your words or your picture and you're going to want to do an insert link and just insert your link there. There's lots of different ways that you can grab that information. You can add it. You can hyperlink a lot of different things in a document. And then notice questions on a Google form I already made. So I can link a Google form here. So if I do right here and I hit this hyperlink, okay, so look what it does. It makes available to me other things that are there in my drive. Okay, so let's say that I'm going to say Hyperdoc survey. Okay, so I already have something, and this is actually the slideshow. I'm just going to hit apply. So notice that link is not taking me to a website. It's taking me to another document or another slideshow. So with your Google tools, you can link to other documents and to other slideshows. Here's an article that I've put here, and like I said, I can either leave this link here or it'd be more effective if I put a word or a picture and link that. And then here's a TED Ed lesson. So I've got kind of the bones of it, but it's not really pretty. Oh, and here's my apply. But you can also insert a table. And that's what you're going to see in a lot of Hyperdocs is a table with all these components in it. It looks more organized than just this flat text. And so the way that would look is that I would put, and I'm just going to cut that and paste it right here into my cell. And so I can put the engage portion here, and then over on this side can be the student's response. And then notice if I want to include a table, I just go to insert table and I determine, you know, how many blanks, how many columns and rows I want on that table. And within that cell, I can right click and go to table properties. And I can give each cell its own background color. So that's how you end up with a table that looks a certain way that kind of jumps off of the page. So those are your basic tools, and those work kind of across the board in all of the different Google applications. All right, so let's see. I am looking at the chat. If a Google app is not shown in the drop down of the link tool, do you click on more to find it or just put it in the title of the document? That's a great question. What I think they are asking is if I decide to do a hyperlink, and here's my drop down, and it shows me a couple of things that exist in my Google Drive that actually have the words TED Ed lesson in there. But if I want to find more, notice that Drive is one of my options. So now I can do a search in my Google Drive for any of those items. So I think maybe that was the question. I look at Brian giving me a look. Yes, it can feel very overwhelming as I go through this, because remember, we only have an hour and a half. So I'm kind of trying to just scratch the surface of this and give you some information about it. You can go back and look at the recording. I do have some other mini recordings on our Technology in Motion website. And I am going to just quickly put that URL down there because lots of webinars, recordings, and videos and things are there as well. All right, so that is showing you just a little bit of if I'm going to create it from scratch. And this is just a quick look at how you would do some of those same things I just did, but in Google Slides. So a lot of people like the freedom in Google Slides. It's easier to add fancy fonts, to manipulate photos. People are just accustomed to slides, maybe over docs. And so you can go in here and do some of those same tasks that I was talking about. And I have just some screenshots there on the presentation showing you how to do that. And if you are familiar with extensions for your Chrome browser, one of my favorite extensions is Bitmoji. Now, Bitmoji, just as a sidebar, is an app that you would first have to have on your phone and create your character. What I love about the extension is it allows me to literally click and drag my Bitmoji right here into my documents and my slideshows. That is super handy. And you can get any kind of extension at the Chrome Web Store. You just Google Chrome Web Store. You can go and find the Bitmoji extension, but you first have to have it on your phone to create your character. It's a lot of fun. Once you have it on your phone, you'll find you can use it in other places. But that's just one super easy way to add yourself into that Hyperdoc. And then, you know, there's so many different things that you can do. If you look at this, you can add images and shape. You can add any object or text box and fill it with color. So you see this box right here, which is just the old text box. If I use that bucket, I can easily fill that entire thing with color. So it's just another way to set apart all of these different pieces. On your insert tool here, you have so many more options that you don't have in the Google Doc, like how I had to go out and find a YouTube video. Here, I can literally just search YouTube or put something from Drive or my URL. So there's a lot more options here. So a lot of people choose Google Slides for their for packaging their Hyperdocs. All right. So here are some examples of Hyperdocs, and notice out to the side, I put the learning cycle. So the first one is on Johnny Appleseed. It's a very simple one with the explain, explore, apply. One of the shortest, simplest learning cycles out there. And these are great examples. On this particular example, notice it is fill in the blank for the students. So in this picture, I see, and you do all these different pieces. Now let me give you a word of warning, and I've got this later in the slideshow. Do not ever, ever, ever click request edit access. If you find a Hyperdoc that someone has shared as an example, do not request edit access. I will show you what you need to do, but that is not what you need to do. So just be patient. You'll notice that this person created it. They've got their signature at the bottom, which says, hey, this is technically my property, but I'm putting it out there for people to use. But you don't want to request to edit it because she doesn't want that. So this is an example of explore, explain, and apply. Notice it's very visual. It's easy to read. It's got explicit instructions. There are hyperlinks sending the students where they need to go to learn information. An introduction to biomes. This is a much larger learning cycle. Discover. So they've got videos and biomes in Google Expeditions, which is a really cool app. And then they have a link to a website on biomes and a thing link, which gives them kind of a hyperlinked picture to look at. Then they've got this wonder where they're asking all of them to add information to a Padlet, which is like a discussion board, and then a chart to learn more. So that one, notice that they changed the background color and then left the boxes and the tables white. Now on to slides. Here's another short one, explain, explore, apply. Check this out. It looks like it is just a single slide. But the slide, and this one has the teacher notes at the bottom, which is nice. On this slide though, and I'm gonna put it in present mode so we can see. When I go to each area and click, it takes me out to another document or slide. Okay, and there's the explain, takes me to a form that has a video. It asks me some questions. So notice I'm already collecting responses from students using a form. And then the apply portion takes me to another Hyperdoc. So it's like I'm linking all these items, but the original Hyperdoc was this simple one slideshow. And then this one, a longer learning cycle, engage, explain, explore, apply, share, reflect. This one is for professional development. And so you can go through, and in the different slides, there are clickable areas. So this one is like, I'm gonna lead you in something. We're gonna watch this together. I'm going to explain our purpose. Here's some exploring I want you to do based on who you teach. And then if you go, there's an inquiry and action sheet where everybody's going to put their information. So this is like a group Hyperdoc you might do in a faculty meeting. So there are lots of applications to using Hyperdocs. Notice there are lots of ways where people can use that learning cycle and send students or teachers or anyone into that learning cycle using different strategies and different tools. So if you're old like me, you might remember this commercial from the 80s on Rice Krispies. I loved it because that was one of the first things I learned to cook was Rice Krispie treats. And if you know anything about them, it's literally 3 ingredients. And I always thought it was so funny because this lady has been in there reading her romance novel while she like puts these 3 ingredients together, but she like puts the flour on her face and makes it look like it was super hard. And her family's like, "Oh, Mom, thank you so much." That's what I feel like with Hyperdocs. It looks hard, but it's only hard if you don't know the cheat. Find an example to copy and remix for your lesson. Rarely would I tell anyone to go out and create a Hyperdoc totally from scratch. Because the reason why Hyperdocs became so popular is because teachers began sharing them and remixing them. And I think that's the reason why certain tools take off with teachers. And I use Kahoot as a great example. Kahoot is a really cool tool. It's a fun game, but the reason why it took off with teachers is because they have a huge gallery of shared quizzes, and I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I can take one someone has created, adapt it for my students, and immediately use it in class. That's the cool thing about remixing Hyperdocs. So I've put this red text here at the top of this particular slide, and I say, come back to this slide. So this is slide 15. So if you learn nothing else from what we're doing, remember, go back to slide 15. This is going to be a whole lot of information for you. And so let's look at, whoops, I accidentally clicked on something and went there a little bit too early, so sorry. And it's kind of strange because, there we go, because my chat box, everything covers it. So first you wanna go to the Hyperdocs Academy website and create an account. So this is what the authors of the Hyperdocs book, this is what their website looks like. If you go looking through Pinterest or looking through some tools and resources and you get to this site and it says link not found, don't worry because they have revamped the entire thing. So some of the links that you get to on older resources may not take you to the right spot, but trust me, this site is phenomenal. I would encourage you look through their courses. I actually went through the remote teaching course. It did not take long. Let me see if I can sign in. It's totally free to have an account. I think part of the reason why they want you to create an account is so that they can keep up with who is using their information, sending information out to people. And there's a lot of reasons why you would create an account with them. But I love the way they have everything packaged into courses now. And here are some of the courses. I went through the remote, oh, look, it's forcing me to go back through my profile stuff. But there are remote teaching courses. There are free courses. I was like, I've started, no, it's going to force me to do my profile. So anyway, notice it is free. I'm sure this means that they are going to have something that is not free in the future. And this course, once you go through the different courses in here, it is really, really useful. It's really, really slow this morning. I don't know why, so I'm just going to close that out. Create a free account and look at their courses. Join the Hyperdocs Facebook group. If you really want to find amazing resources, join this free Facebook group. I cannot tell you how many times I've just seen on my Facebook feed where people have shared something. Okay, so here's an example of somebody creating their first Hyperdocs for the French and Indian War. Oftentimes people say, does anyone have, and they'll say, do you have a Hyperdoc on this topic? Here's one on 3rd grade weather and climate. And so look, here's one on Lord of the Flies. And so people are just sharing things. When someone is searching for something, they put it out here and say, looking for a 5th grade Hyperdocs. And you can follow that and see if someone responds. I highly recommend that Hyperdocs Facebook group And if you're looking for something specific, I'm sure somebody can send you a resource. Search Pinterest for Hyperdocs boards, but not right now because I will lose you. You can find so many resources there. Start with this basic Hyperdoc template. This is from the Hyperdocs Academy website. This is their basic Hyperdoc lesson plan template. Look at the formatting I did not have to do for this. So I didn't have to do anything. Already it's got these neat icons on the side. It's got color. It's already got some nice fonts in there. So I can just go in here, make my copy of it and edit it. So it is a simple way for you to remix everything. And like Brian said in the chat, the students are never going to know the difference, that you did not make it originally. And then here's another simple template, which is the 3-step learning cycle: explore, explain, apply. Looks familiar, like the Johnny Appleseed template that you saw earlier. It's because this person just used this right here and customized everything in it to make that. And then here's a template and slide. So those other two were in docs. Look at this one. How cute is this? With all of these colors and icons, very visual and easy for you to go in and adapt. So notice they even gave kind of a credit slide at the end, which I think is kind of cool. Remix one that you like. So what do I mean by remix? You know, I told you, do not request edit access. So once you open a view-only version of a template that you like, or of a Hyperdoc that you want to remix, you have to be signed into your Google account and make a copy. Now, if you're a PowerPoint or a Microsoft Word person, follow this same plan. You're going to download it as a Word document or as a PowerPoint and manipulate it however you want through those tools. Or sign into your Google account and make a copy. And so I just gave you kind of an example here to remix. So here's one for middle school called My Superhero. It's got a lot of great ideas in it, and it is super easy to read. It's even got like the standards. And I will tell you this, Teachers Give Teachers site is actually where you're going to find the broken links, because the Hyperdocs website has kind of changed its focus, and they're looking at those basic templates, some sharing on there, and then their courses. So if you see a Teachers Give Teachers site, just know that that is not going to be one that you will find on the Hyperdocs website. All right, so that's what I mean by remix. Do not request edit access. So this is what I mean to remix. Step 1, make a copy. So rename as needed, change the sharing settings. We're going to look at that. And then step 2, check all of the links. You know, you don't want to, just like you wouldn't want to show a YouTube video that you had not previewed in your class, you want to make sure all the links in that Hyperdoc are appropriate. Or do you need to make new links because it goes to a Padlet or a Google form that you don't have permissions to? And then you're going to revise and edit it to fit your students. Consider workflow changes, like should the students use a web tool instead of a writer's notebook? And then give credit to the original author and add your own name. So at the end, add remixed by, original by, whomever. The kids won't care, but it's just important because teachers are giving these things. So I am going to, before we go any further, I do want to check and see if we have questions. So just kind of looking back at the chat. Yeah, I do feel like that there's a lot of people trying to reinvent the wheel during remote learning. They felt like they had to do something brand new, when really we needed to do something that is what our students are used to, but just adapt it so that it works in a digital environment. That's why I think Hyperdocs is a great opportunity, because it's familiar to students. The tool itself is familiar, but the engagement piece of it in that learning cycle is really neat. All right, so any thoughts or questions so far on anything? So once you make a copy of a document, does it strictly belong to you? That's a great question. Yes, if you do make a copy, the title of it will be copy of whatever, and it will live in your Google Drive. So, and I will quickly demonstrate that. So let me just grab back up here where it says an example to remix. Okay, so this is one that does not belong to me. I'm in view only. So I'm going to say file, make a copy. Notice the name of it is copy of my superhero, Renee Johnson. If when you're making a copy, it does not have the name of the teacher, I would encourage you to add that into the name of the document if it's not already on the document somewhere, just so that you'll know the name of the person. You can search them again if you like some of the things that they have out there, and you don't have to go hunting for that name. So that's just a tip. And then I'm going to say okay. Now look at the difference. I have all my editing tools here because this is my copy. It is in my drive. So if I go here, I can move, I can see where it's living in my drive now. It's my copy. And then if I go here, I can see all of the changes have been saved. So this is my copy that is ready for me to remix, which looks different than this. There's no request edit access. This one's mine. So I can go in here and do whatever I want to that particular document. Let's see, can it be taken away by the owner if it's a copy of it? That is an interesting question. If you make your own copy, it should not be something that tells you that it is in the owner's trash. That would only be if, I believe, if you've made a shortcut to it, if you just chose add to drive rather than make a copy, that may be why you get that message. Anybody else that's a Google guru have a tip on that? Pretty sure that's the case. If I make a copy, it is my copy. It would just be like you making a copy for every student in Google Classroom or handing out a physical copy. It's theirs. They can write on it, do whatever they want, throw it away. So, so anyway, that's a good question there too. All right, so we looked at how to do this remix process. Let's look at a couple of templates. So I love this template because it has explanations. This one is phenomenal. This one actually does belong to me. It was not mine to begin with, but this is my copy. Look at this. This is literally telling you what to do every step of the way. Insert your own image. And then they even have a cool Padlet filled with copyright image resources. This is amazing. This is actually something that I might include for my students when they're looking for images to put in anything that they're creating. So this is a Padlet that teachers have collaborated on, or this teacher has created herself, filled with sites that have copyright-free images that you or your students can use. And that is simply right there where it says insert your image. So now I can just look for my image, grab it, and put it in here. My title, my lesson objective, or my essential question. And then they tell you each step of the way what to do in that step of the learning cycle. Explore, this is where you're going to insert links, images, videos, articles, allowing students to build background knowledge. Each of these is another Padlet filled with resources. So like I said, if you want to spend hours on this, just my slideshow, you're going to just find tons of resources. There's the images Padlet. There is articles. I think that Brian mentioned Newsela. I say it's Newsela. I don't know if you call it News ELA, but I've always called it Newsela. I think he mentioned that. No Red Ink. You know, there's several different sites that you can use that allow you to manipulate articles or add questions to articles for students, particularly older students, and then possible resources. So here's a whole Google site on multimedia text sets, which is sometimes what people call Hyperdocs. They call them multimedia text sets. And so here is just more information on that, and some ideas for using these multimedia text sets. So, I mean, like I said, this is just you're gonna go nuts looking through this. So there's the Explore. Notice that they have the student task on the right, the Explain step with some possible resources, and then what kind of task you would give your students. And then Apply and Share, and kind of talking about what you might use, some possible resources for that. And then the optional extension activity, and then all of these information on where this came from, who made it. Just a great template for you to look at as you're progressing through this. And then this one is a template of technology tools. Now, if you're a geek like me, this will make you just want to cry. It is awesome. So if you're looking for a tech tool to engage students, I do not recommend that you try to include a new tech tool in every section of your Hyperdoc. That will drive you nuts. It will drive your students nuts. But I always encourage teachers, if you'll pick maybe one new technology tool a 9 weeks, pick that, teach your students how to use it, get comfortable, use it, utilize it, and then next 9 weeks, build on that and use something different. This is a great list of ideas for you to use, because I always say, I don't want you to focus on the technology tool. You are a reading teacher. You are not a Google Forms teacher or a flip quiz teacher. You're not trying to teach the tech tool. You will have to do some instruction on it, but that doesn't need to be your complete focus. So pick one of these tools. Notice Kahoot is an Engage tool, and maybe utilize one or two of these in a Hyperdoc with students. So I'm going to tell you, I've not checked every one of these links to know that they all work. But when I glanced at this, I knew that a lot of these links are links that I've recommended to students. So this has got a lot of great ideas on how you might engage students in a Hyperdoc. All right, so back to the presentation. The following slides are very inspiring. Do not let them overwhelm you, but I love that these learning cycle steps have tools and Hyperdoc examples. So remember, this looks just like one of those templates that I showed you with a colorful slide in the table. And so here in the engage step, this is where you engage students at the beginning of a lesson, inserting one of these things. There's podcasts, YouTube videos, images, memes. And then this is a link to their book, the Hyperdocs book. This is where you can find where these ideas came from. Explore. You're going to curate a collection of resources for students to explore. When we used to talk about the 4 C's in technology education, which is, creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking, I always used to add a 5th. I think students need to have the skill of curation, because I want them to curate the good stuff and leave out the non-quality resources. So here it's asking you to curate a collection of resources, but you can also, for older students, give them a lot and ask them to curate resources together. But this is where they're exploring. And so they have some great examples of each of these tools being used. So an example that I love is a Google My Maps. Look at this one, Martin Luther King Jr. So it's going to use Google Maps, which we have all used, and you can create your own custom map. So here it says, learn about Martin Luther King Jr. This biographical map will give you an overview. So I'm going to click on point 1, and look, it gives me a description. Atlanta, Georgia is where he was born. So I'm going to go back and go to point 2. And here's the drinking fountain. It's segregation, so it's got the image there. Point 3 in Atlanta, Georgia. So as I go through all of these, I can even click on the map. I can go closer. This is a unique way for your students to take kind of their own little virtual field trip. So I just thought that was really clever. The explain step, notice I've got some tools here on the side and a Hyperdoc showing how that tool is used. So here's a YouTube playlist. If you don't know how to make YouTube playlists, I think that's very underutilized by teachers. And so what if I'm doing a unit on weather? Here's an entire playlist of relatively short videos on weather. And so I can include that playlist for students to explore and learn about that particular topic. The apply step, here are some tools. Some of these tools are not free. Some of them have a free version. So keep that in mind. You could strictly just stick with the Google tools and be great. But I love that it explores some other things. Here's a show what you know bingo. I really, really like this one. I have used something similar to this in professional development, and it's a choice board. So I know many of you have probably seen some of these circulating during remote learning. A choice board, it's just a Hyperdoc. And so notice all they did is they changed the background color, added a table, added some graphics, and each of these are linked out to these different tools. The share option is just saying, what tool am I going to be using to collect the student work and the student feedback? Forms, sheets, slides, docs, all of those are things that you're accustomed to, that you're used to. I like this one. This is a public service announcement Hyperdoc. So as a former theater teacher, I have given this assignment before in my English class, asking students to do a public service announcement type video. And so here is a really neat Hyperdoc plan for creating a PSA. So I like that one. And then reflect. I told you that I tend to forget about the reflect part. And so here's some ideas on using a reflection tool. And so take time to reflect on the process. And so, you know, what's been the most surprising thing that you've learned? How has writing about reading helped you? Create your own Voki to start talking. What'd you learn about the theme? What'd you learn about what challenge have you faced as a reader? So, so this is something that, you know, is free. Somebody created this and they're sharing this with you if that's something that you can use. And then an extension activity, like an online game and a blog. So I know that I went through that super fast. And I know that we have about 15 minutes left, but I did want to just kind of stop and ask if you had any specific questions or if there was a resource that you can see yourself trying. Somebody give me some thoughts or feedback, because I've been doing a lot of talking.
So on that choice board that you just showed us, I can see where, like, I had made a Padlet before for my class, and I use it every year for the websites that they can go to. They're strictly only able to go to those websites.
Yeah.
And I had heard that Padlet only allows you to make 3 free Padlets. So what I think that I'm going to do now is probably make a choice board Hyperdoc instead of utilizing the Padlet resource.
Yeah, Carmen is right. I used to be a huge fan of Padlet. I used it in tons of my PD when it was free. Now it's limited, and your option is to just delete them and create new ones. So, yeah, I think this would be a great answer for that, because what I'm hearing is just like those Padlets that I showed you examples of, people are just using those as resource holders. So, essentially, your Hyperdoc can be a resource holder for your students. Kind of like a Symbaloo. People use Symbaloo to hold their resources. So yeah, that's a good one.
Can we do that for our homework?
Hey, that's a great segue into that slide that I just left. What is your final assignment? You're going to create or remix a Hyperdoc. Use whatever tool you choose. It must be for the grade and the subject that you teach. Please make something that's going to be useful to you in the fall. So I put on here that it must contain a clear learning cycle. If you are going to do something like a choice board, my recommendation would be just giving those explicit instructions on how those resources are going to be used, so that it's not just a page of links, if that makes sense. Decide what areas you're going to use for response or reflection. So it doesn't have to be like some of the templates where one side of it was for the students to write in, although you can do that. But it might be that you link to something where they're going to respond, like a Google form or a document. You want to link to at least 3 related videos. So whatever your topic is, link at least 3 videos, YouTube videos, TeacherTube, I don't care where they come from, at least 3 pictures so that it's graphic. Use at least 2 different technology tools. Well, the one tool is going to be the tool you use to package it. So Google Docs, Google Slides, whatever, and then another technology tool that you're asking the students to use. Now, I always have this question, does Kahoot count? If you want to include that as an engagement tool, that's not really a tool that you want the students to have to use. So I would say that can be an engagement tool for you as the teacher to use, but unless the students are doing like a self-paced Kahoot, I would say find something the students have to manipulate. And at least link out to one other document or slideshow in your drive. So put something, a resource or something in your drive or another Hyperdoc that you like, and link out to that. And so I went over this, like I said, fairly quickly. What you're going to do once you've done all of this, don't email me your Hyperdoc. What I'd like for you to do is to go to this Google form, and this is where you're going to upload your final assignment. So you're going to put your email address, last name, first name. You can either upload your file. So if you make this in Word or PowerPoint or Google Docs or whatever, and you want to upload the physical file, you can do that. Or you can share your Hyperdoc with me. So for example, let's see, do I have one open that is mine? There we go. So if I was going to share this one in that form, I would go to share and make sure down here in the link part that you have changed it, because right now in most school district domains, you're going to see this restricted, it's gray. You need to change it to anyone with the link. On my domain account, it first says anyone in like Etowah County, whatever. You want to change that to anyone with the link, because I'm not in your domain. So make sure you change that. You copy the link. And then when you go to this final assignment page, you would just paste that link right there and submit. Notice that these questions right here are not required because it's either or. You don't have to upload and put your link. Either one will work. And what that does, it just gives me a spreadsheet with everybody's work right there together. So that's really my preferred way. If like right now your mind is blown and the only thing you know to do is email me, that's fine. Just know that I'm chasing down assignments and attendance and everything else. And if it's all in one place, this teacher is like, it's easy for me to find. So I would encourage you to make this assignment something you're going to use in the fall. So I hope that you're able to do that from what we've learned today. And I'll go ahead and paste the link to our attendance form in the chat box. And then I'm going to stop sharing my screen again so that you guys can ask me any other questions. And I'll look at the chat box too. Thank you, Brian, giving people words of encouragement. Don't be afraid to try. That is the truth. Hyperdoc is whatever you want it to be. And so that's why I say start with remixing one. Don't try to make it look perfect. I have a lot of people that freak out because the font's not exactly like they like it. Keep in mind, the students won't know. They will just like that it is very visual and that they are traveling back and forth between the document and other places. So if you will please fill out that attendance form, it is a really long link and I apologize. You may have to copy that whole thing. And because it goes to a different line, it may give you trouble, but hopefully not. Copy and paste that if you can't click it. Any other questions? I'm going to just be quiet and you can either type your questions in the chat or you can unmute your mic and ask. Once you've done the attendance form, you are free to go. And I think I put on there that the 16th is our due date for this. So just, I'm going to stop recording too while we get questions.